You're listening to The Night Watchman, where the stories may sound fictional, but the fear feels real. Before we begin, hit like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you're listening from. Now turn off the lights, lock your doors, and don't stop listening. I still remember the last night I worked at Wendy's. It was a Tuesday in November, just outside a small town in Ohio. The restaurant sat beside an almost empty highway, surrounded by a gas station, a closed furniture store, and miles of dark farmland. During the day, it was ordinary. Families came in after school. Truck drivers stopped for coffee. Teenagers crowded the dining room. But after midnight, the place felt completely different. I had been working the overnight shift for almost 6 months. My name is Daniel, and at the time I was 27 years old. I took the job because I needed money. My father had died 8 months earlier, and after his funeral, I couldn't bring myself to stay in the apartment we had shared. My younger sister, Emily, had moved to another state for college, and I was basically alone. The overnight shift paid a little more, so I took it. Most nights were boring. That was exactly why what happened next scared me so badly. That Tuesday night, my coworker Marcus was supposed to work with me. He was 19, always joking around, always wearing one earbud while cleaning tables. At 11:48 p.m., he received a phone call. I remember because I was standing beside the fryer when he answered. He listened for a few seconds. Then his face changed. "Everything okay?" I asked. He nodded. "Yeah, I just have to go." "Go where?" "My mom." He grabbed his jacket. I laughed. "You're leaving me alone?" He looked toward the dining room. Then he said something I'll never forget. "Don't let anyone in after 2. I thought he was joking. "What?" "After 2, he repeated. "If someone knocks on the front door, don't open it." I smiled. "Why?" He didn't answer. He simply walked out. I watched his car disappear into the darkness. At midnight, I was alone. At 12:37, a customer came through the drive-thru. At 1:15, another. Then nothing. The restaurant became completely silent. I started cleaning the dining room. That's when I noticed something strange. There was a small security monitor behind the counter. It showed the parking lot, the drive-thru lane, the back entrance, and the dumpster area. I glanced at it. The back entrance camera was flickering. I walked into the office and tapped the monitor. The screen went black, then came back. For 1 second, I saw someone standing behind the restaurant. A woman. She was wearing an old red coat. Her face was turned away from the camera. I stared at the screen. Then the camera flickered again. She was gone. I checked the back door. It was locked. I returned to the counter. At 1:57 a.m., someone knocked on the front door. 3 slow knocks. Knock, knock, knock. I froze. The dining room lights were still on, but the parking lot outside was completely empty. I checked the security monitor. Nothing. I waited. Then 3 more knocks. Knock, knock, knock. I remembered Marcus. Don't let anyone in after 2. I didn't move. A minute passed. Then I heard a woman's voice. "Please." I stood behind the counter. "Hello? Please open the door." Her voice sounded exhausted, like she had been crying. I walked toward the entrance, then stopped. Something felt wrong. I looked through the glass. The woman in the red coat was standing outside. She was staring directly at me. Her face was pale. Her hair was soaked with rain. But it wasn't raining. Not that night. She raised one hand and pointed toward the dining room. Then she whispered something. I couldn't hear it. I stepped closer. She said it again. "He's inside." My stomach dropped. I turned around. The restaurant was empty. "Who?" I whispered. The woman pointed behind me. Then the lights went out. Everything became black. I heard something move in the kitchen. A metal tray hit the floor. Clang! I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. "Who's there?" No answer. I slowly walked toward the kitchen. The emergency lights came on. The kitchen was empty, but the back door was open. I ran toward it. The door slammed shut by itself. I locked it. Then I noticed something scratched into the metal surface. 3 words. "Don't look up." I stared at them. My heart started pounding. I looked at the ceiling. Nothing. Then I heard breathing. Right above me. I stepped backward. The ceiling tiles were old and stained. One of them moved, just slightly. I ran. I locked myself inside the manager's office. My hands were shaking so badly that I almost dropped my phone. I called Marcus. No answer. I called again. Nothing. Then my phone rang. It was Marcus. I answered immediately. "Where are you?" There was silence. "Marcus?" A faint voice finally came through. "Daniel? Where are you? I told you not to open the door." "I didn't." Another silence. Then he whispered, "Good. What's happening?" His breathing became heavier. "Daniel, listen carefully." I heard a car horn in the background. "I need you to leave through the front." "The front door?" "Yes. But you told me." "I know what I told you." His voice cracked. "I was wrong." Then the call ended. I stared at my phone. Outside the office, something slowly walked past the door. I saw its shadow beneath the gap. 2 feet. Then it stopped. I couldn't breathe. A soft knock came from the other side. "Daniel!" It was my father's voice. I nearly screamed. My father had been dead for 8 months. The voice came again. "Daniel, open the door!" I covered my mouth. Tears filled my eyes. It sounded exactly like him. Same voice. Same tired tone. Even the little pause he always made before saying my name. "Daniel," I whispered, "you're not my dad." The shadow disappeared. For several seconds, there was nothing. Then the office phone rang. I stared at it. The caller ID showed kitchen. There was no kitchen phone. I picked up. Static. Then a woman's voice. "He's angry now." I dropped the receiver. At 3:04 a.m., the front doors unlocked by themselves. I ran. I didn't think. I grabbed my jacket and sprinted outside. The parking lot was empty. I ran toward my car. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Fast footsteps. I looked back. The woman in the red coat was standing in the restaurant doorway. She wasn't chasing me. She was crying. She pointed toward the highway. I turned. A vehicle was approaching. It was an old white delivery van. The van stopped beside me. The driver's window rolled down. Marcus was inside. "Get in!" I jumped in. He drove away without saying anything. We didn't stop until we reached a gas station nearly 10 miles away. I finally asked him, "What happened?" Marcus stared through the windshield. "My mom never called me." I looked at him. "What?" "I got a call from the restaurant." He swallowed. "Someone used the manager's phone." I felt cold. "What did they say?" Marcus looked at me. "They said my name." We sat in silence. Then he explained something I'd never known. 3 years earlier, a teenage girl named Sarah had worked at that Wendy's. She worked overnight. One night she disappeared. The police searched the building. They found blood in the kitchen, but they never found her body. The restaurant stayed open. The owners changed. Employees changed. But something strange kept happening. Every few months, an overnight employee would report seeing a woman in a red coat, and every person who saw her heard the same sentence. "He's inside." Marcus looked at me. "The woman isn't Sarah." "Then who is she?" He shook his head. "Nobody knows." I remembered the voice in the office. "Who was inside?" Marcus didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out an old photograph. It showed the Wendy's parking lot. A group of employees stood outside, and in the background was a man, standing near the kitchen entrance. His face was scratched out. "Who is that?" Marcus whispered. "The manager from 1998. I looked at the picture again. Then I noticed something. The woman in the red coat was standing beside him, and she was looking directly at the camera. Marcus took the photograph from my hands. "Daniel, what?" "This picture was taken 28 years ago." I stared at him. "And," he pointed toward the woman, "look at her face." I looked. She wasn't old. She looked exactly the same as the woman I had seen that night, 28 years later. We never went back. The Wendy's closed a few months afterward. The building was eventually demolished. But something happened before it came down. Workers discovered a small room behind the kitchen wall. There was no record of the room on any building plans. Inside were dozens of employee name tags. Some belonged to people who had worked there decades earlier, and on the floor was a single red coat. The police took it as evidence. But according to Marcus, the strangest thing happened afterward. Every employee whose name tag was found in that room had disappeared at some point in their life. Except me. My name tag was there too. I know because I saw it. And underneath my name was a date. The date I had started working at Wendy's. But below that was another date. A date that hadn't happened yet. October 17th, 2027. I still have the photograph. I still have the name tag. And sometimes when I'm driving late at night, I pass an old Wendy's sign somewhere along the highway. The building is gone. The parking lot is gone. There should be nothing there. But every time I pass that spot, I see the same thing through the darkness. A woman in a red coat standing beside the road. And she always raises her hand. She always points behind me. And once, just once, I looked in my rear view mirror. There was someone sitting in the back seat. He was wearing an old Wendy's uniform. His face was hidden in the darkness, but I could hear him breathing. Then he whispered, "Daniel." I never looked back again. Story 2. I still remember the smell of that Wendy's after midnight. Not the food, not the fryer oil, the smell of wet concrete, old cardboard, and something faintly sweet that I could never identify. I was 27 when I took the night shift job at a Wendy's outside Dayton, Ohio. I had just moved back home after my mother died, and honestly, I wasn't looking for a career. I was looking for somewhere that would hire me quickly. The manager, a tired-looking man named Rick, told me the overnight shift was easy. Mostly truck deliveries, cleaning, and the occasional drunk college kid, he said. Then he paused. And if you hear someone knocking from the back hallway, don't open the door. I laughed because I thought he was joking. He wasn't. The restaurant sat beside an old county road, surrounded by empty lots and a few abandoned buildings. During the day, it was noisy and ordinary. At night, it felt completely different. My first few shifts were uneventful. Then, on my 6th night at exactly 2:17 a.m., I heard 3 knocks. Knock, knock, knock. They came from behind the kitchen. I stopped wiping the counter. There was a narrow employee hallway back there leading to a storage area, a restroom, and an old metal door. That door had always been locked. I walked toward it. Another 3 knocks. Knock, knock, knock. I called Rick. He answered on the 4th ring. What? Someone's knocking in the back. There was silence. Then Rick said something that made my stomach tighten. Are you standing near the gray door? Yeah. Walk away from it. Why? Just walk away. I did. The knocking stopped. I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. The next morning, I asked one of the older employees about the door. Her name was Denise. When I mentioned it, her face changed. You heard it? Heard what? The knocking. I nodded. She looked toward the manager's office before lowering her voice. That door wasn't always there. What do you mean? She hesitated. Then she told me something I still think about whenever I pass a Wendy's at night. Before the restaurant had been built, there was a small roadside diner on the property. It had burned down in 1998. 3 people died, a waitress named Laura, a delivery driver named Michael, and Laura's 8-year-old daughter, Emily. According to Denise, Emily had been sleeping in a small room behind the kitchen while her mother worked. The fire started around 2 a.m. Firefighters couldn't reach the back room because a metal security door had jammed shut. Emily had apparently been trapped inside. The strange part? The old diner had no back room on the official building plans. At least, that's what the investigators claimed. The property was eventually cleared. Years later, Wendy's was built there. And during construction, workers supposedly found an old metal door buried behind the foundation. They removed it, or at least they thought they did. Because when the Wendy's opened, that same gray door appeared in the employee hallway. Locked. No handle on the outside. No room behind it, according to the building plans. I laughed when Denise finished. That's just an urban legend. She didn't laugh. Then explain why nobody opens it. That night, I decided to prove everyone wrong. At 2:17 a.m., the knocking came again. 3 knocks. Exactly the same. I grabbed my phone and started recording. I walked down the hallway, the fluorescent lights buzzed above me. I stood directly in front of the gray door. Hello? Nothing. Then a little girl's voice whispered from the other side. Mom? I froze. The voice came again. Mom! I couldn't breathe. Then something scratched the metal, slowly from the inside. I backed away. My phone slipped from my hand. And then I heard something else. A woman crying, not screaming, crying, softly, like someone who had been crying for hours. I ran back to the front counter and called Rick. He answered immediately. You opened it? No. Good. How did you know? Rick didn't answer. Instead, he said, listen to me carefully. If you hear the little girl again, do not answer her. Why? Because that's not Emily. The line went dead. I stared at my phone. Then the restaurant's front doors unlocked by themselves. Both of them. The automatic lights outside came on. I looked through the glass. Someone was standing in the parking lot. A little girl, maybe 8 years old, barefoot, wearing an old red dress. She stood beneath the parking lot light, staring directly at me. I couldn't move. She lifted one hand and pointed toward the back hallway. Then she mouthed 4 words. She's still in there. I turned around. The gray door was open. I knew it had been locked. I had seen it, but now it was open about 6 inches. Darkness filled the gap. I should have run. Instead, I walked toward it. Maybe grief makes people stupid. My mother had been gone for 6 months, and there were nights when I would have done anything just to hear her voice again. As I reached the door, I heard a woman whisper from inside. Ethan? My mother's voice. I stopped. Nobody at Wendy's knew my mother's name. Nobody knew what her voice sounded like. Ethan, please. My eyes filled with tears. I stepped closer. The door opened another inch. Then I remembered Rick's warning. Don't answer. I backed away. The voice changed. It became angry. Ethan! The lights went out. Every light in the restaurant. The kitchen, the dining room, the bathrooms. Everything. Then the freezer door slammed open. I heard footsteps, running, from the back hallway, toward me. I grabbed the nearest object I could find, a mop, and ran for the front entrance. But before I reached it, the little girl's voice whispered behind me, Don't leave me. I turned. She was standing inside the restaurant, not outside anymore. She looked exactly as she had through the glass. Bare feet, red dress, wet hair covering half her face. But now I could see her eyes. They were completely black. She pointed behind me. I looked. The gray door was gone. There was only a normal painted wall. I ran. I didn't stop until I reached my car. I drove home and didn't sleep. The next morning I quit. I didn't explain everything to Rick. I simply told him I couldn't work there anymore. He looked at me for several seconds. Then he said, You saw her, didn't you? I nodded. Rick sighed. My brother worked here before me. He told me his brother had disappeared during an overnight shift in 2011. Security cameras showed him entering the back hallway at 2:17 a.m. He never came back. Police searched the building. Nothing. No exit. No body. No explanation. The only thing they found was his phone. It had been recording. The final audio contained 3 knocks, then a little girl's voice, and finally his voice saying, I'm sorry, Emily. Rick looked at me. That's why I never let anyone open that door. I asked him one last question. Why did she show herself to me? He looked genuinely afraid. I don't know. I went home. I never returned to that Wendy's. 3 weeks later, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photograph. It showed the Wendy's dining room. The photo looked old, yellowed, faded, but I could clearly see the counter, the tables, the kitchen entrance, and me, standing behind the counter. The picture had been taken from the back hallway. The back hallway that wasn't visible from anywhere in the dining room. On the back of the photograph, someone had written 2:17 a.m. Underneath that were 4 words. You left her there. I threw the photograph away, or at least I thought I did, because the next morning it was sitting on my kitchen table. And this time, there was something different in the picture. The little girl was standing behind me. Her hand rested on my shoulder, and beside her stood my mother. Both of them were staring directly into the camera. I haven't worked another overnight job since, but sometimes when I'm driving late at night and I pass a Wendy's, I slow down. Not because I want to remember, because I'm afraid I'll see someone standing outside. A little girl, barefoot, wearing a red dress, waiting beside the doors. And if I ever see her again, I know exactly what she'll say. She'll point toward the restaurant and whisper, your shift isn't over. Story 3, I was working the night shift at a Wendy's outside Columbus, Ohio, when I learned something I still can't explain. It was a Tuesday in November. Cold rain had been falling since sunset, the kind that made the parking lot shine under the streetlights and turned every passing car into a blurry reflection. I was 28 years old and had been working at that Wendy's for almost 6 months. The job wasn't exciting. Usually the overnight shift meant cleaning the kitchen, restocking cups, taking drive-through orders, and trying not to fall asleep between customers. But I like nights. My younger sister Emily lived with me at the time, and working nights meant I could be home during the day when she needed me. Emily was 17. Our mother had died 2 years earlier, and after that things changed. My father had disappeared from our lives long before Mom died, so Emily and I basically became each other's family. She was the reason I worked 2 jobs. She was the reason I never complained about being tired, and she was the reason I always came home before sunrise. That Tuesday night, my shift started at 10 p.m. By midnight, the restaurant was almost completely empty. At 12:17, my co-worker, Marcus, left. He stood near the back door, pulling his jacket over his uniform. "You good alone?" he asked. I laughed. "I've been alone here plenty of times." Marcus hesitated. Then he looked toward the dining room. "You hear about the old drive-through window?" I frowned. "What old window?" He stared at me for a second. "Never mind." "Marcus." He smiled awkwardly. "Ask Larry." "Who's Larry?" "The manager." Then he walked out. I watched his truck disappear into the rain. I thought he was joking. At 12:40, I was cleaning the counter when the drive-through speaker suddenly clicked on. I froze. The speaker made a small burst of static. Then a woman's voice whispered, "Can I get a number 6? I looked at the monitor. No car was showing on the camera. I pressed the microphone. "Hello?" Nothing. Then the speaker clicked again. "Please." I walked toward the drive-through window. The lane was empty. Rainwater was running across the pavement. No headlights, no vehicle, nothing. I laughed nervously. "Great. Broken speaker." I turned around. That's when I heard knocking. 3 slow knocks. From the other side of the drive-through window, I stopped breathing. I looked back. There was nobody outside. Then it happened again. Knock, knock, knock. I grabbed my phone and called Marcus. He didn't answer. I called the manager. No answer. I stood there for nearly a minute. Then I noticed something strange. The window wasn't locked. I knew I'd locked it earlier. I stepped closer, and that's when I saw writing on the glass. It had been written from the outside with a finger. 4 words. "Please don't close again." I backed away. I didn't understand what it meant. Then the kitchen lights flickered. Once. Twice. Everything went dark. For about 3 seconds. When the lights came back on, the dining room was empty. But one chair was pulled away from a table, and sitting on the table was a small red child's hair clip. I knew that clip. It belonged to Emily. I had seen her wearing it that morning. My heart dropped. I immediately called her. She answered after 3 rings. "Hey, Emily, where are you?" "At home." "You sure?" She laughed. "Obviously." I closed my eyes. "Did you come here tonight?" There was silence. Then she said, "No." I looked toward the drive-thru. "Are you wearing the red hair clip?" Another silence. "No." I slowly turned around. The hair clip was still sitting on the table. Then Emily whispered, "Why?" Before I could answer, I heard something through the phone. A faint scratching sound. Then Emily said, "Wait, what?" "I thought I heard someone downstairs." I stood up straight. "Lock your bedroom door." "What?" "Just do it." I ran toward the back office. The security monitor showed the restaurant from several angles. Dining room, kitchen, parking lot, drive-through. Everything looked normal, except for camera 4. Camera 4 showed something I had never seen before. A second drive-through lane. My mouth went dry. Our Wendy's only had 1 drive-through lane, but on the monitor there were 2. The second lane disappeared behind the building, and at the end of it was an old drive-through window. Someone was standing there. A little girl. She was wearing a red jacket. Her face was turned away from the camera. I grabbed the radio. "Marcus?" Static. Then a man's voice answered. Not Marcus. "She's waiting." I dropped the radio. I didn't move. The voice came again. She doesn't like being forgotten. I shut off the monitor. I grabbed my keys. I was leaving. I didn't care about the job. I didn't care about anything. Then my phone rang. It was Emily. I answered immediately. Emily! She was crying. There's someone outside my room. My stomach twisted. Call 911. I tried. What happened? They answered. Who? The woman. I could barely speak. What woman? Emily whispered. She said you're already here. At that exact moment, something hit the back door of the Wendy's. Boom! I jumped. Then again. Boom! Boom! I ran to the office door and locked it. My phone was still connected. Emily, listen to me. Stay in your room. I am. Don't open the door. I won't. Then she started crying harder. What's wrong? She keeps knocking. I heard it through the phone. 3 slow knocks. Knock, knock, knock. The same sound I had heard at the drive-thru. I couldn't breathe. Then Emily whispered, She just said your name. I looked at the office door. Something scratched the other side, slowly, like fingernails dragging across the wood. Then a woman's voice spoke from the hallway. Can I get a number 6? I covered my mouth. The voice continued. Please. I remembered Marcus asking me about the old drive-thru window. I remembered his words. Ask Larry. I called the manager again. This time he answered. His voice sounded terrified. Leave the building. Larry, what is happening? Don't look at the second drive-thru. Why? Silence. Then he said, Because there is no second drive-thru. I know. You don't understand. His breathing became heavy. 30 years ago, that building wasn't a Wendy's. I listened. It was a small roadside diner, he continued. A family owned it. A woman named Sarah worked there with her daughter, Lily. My heart started beating faster. Lily was 6 years old. Larry paused. One night, there was a fire. What happened? Sarah got out. I already knew the answer. Lily didn't. Larry's voice cracked. She was trapped behind the kitchen. I looked toward the hallway. The scratching had stopped. Why the drive-thru? There wasn't supposed to be one, Larry continued. After the fire, the building was rebuilt. Years later, the property became a Wendy's. And every few years, someone working the overnight shift reported seeing an extra window. My hands were shaking. What happened to them? Larry didn't answer. Larry, finally he said, they heard Lily asking for food. That's it? No. His voice became quieter. She always asked for the same thing. A number 6? Yes. Why? Because that's what her mother promised to bring her the night of the fire. I felt something cold touch the back of my neck. I turned. Nobody was there. Larry said, Listen carefully. I'm listening. If you see the second window, don't open it. What if she keeps knocking? Don't answer. What if she says my name? Don't answer. And if she shows me something? Larry's voice trembled. Especially then. The call ended. I stood alone in the office. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Emily. She's gone. I exhaled. Then another message appeared. She's standing outside the Wendy's. My blood turned cold. I looked toward the security monitor. Camera 4 was on again. The second lane was there. The little girl stood beside the old window. This time she was facing the camera. Her face was pale. Her eyes were dark. And in her hand was something small, a red hair clip. My sister's hair clip. Then the camera switched to the parking lot. Emily was standing there, outside the Wendy's, barefoot, still wearing her pajamas. I screamed. I ran out of the office. Emily! She was standing beside the second drive-thru lane, except there was no second lane in front of me. Only darkness, rain, and the empty parking lot. Then Emily appeared beside the normal drive-thru window. She looked at me and smiled. I ran toward her, but something stopped me. Her eyes. They weren't Emily's eyes. I stopped 3 feet away. She whispered, I'm hungry. I stepped backward. Emily? She smiled wider. Number 6. Then the lights went out. When they came back on, she was gone. The police arrived 20 minutes later. They searched the entire building. They searched the parking lot. They searched the road behind the restaurant. They found nothing. And Emily? She was at home. Safe. She had never left the house. The police told me my phone call with her had probably been some kind of confusion. I didn't argue. I quit the next morning. I never went back. But 3 months later, Larry called me. He said something had been found during renovation. Behind a wall in the old kitchen, a small metal box. Inside was a photograph. It showed a woman and a little girl standing outside the original diner. On the back, someone had written, Lily, age 6. And underneath it, she never got her number 6. I thought that was the end. It wasn't. Because 2 weeks ago, I received an envelope at my apartment. No return address. Inside was the photograph and a small red hair clip, the same one I had seen on that table. There was one final thing inside, a receipt from Wendy's, dated yesterday. The order said, one number 6. Underneath it, in handwriting I recognized, were 4 words. I'm still waiting, brother. I don't work at Wendy's anymore. I don't even drive past that location. But every Tuesday night at exactly 12:17 a.m., my phone receives the same notification. No number, no contact name, just a message. Can I get a number 6? And last night, for the first time, another message appeared underneath it. Please don't close again. Story 4, I still remember the exact time I first saw the Wendy's sign. 2:17 a.m. It was raining hard that night in Ohio, the kind of rain that makes every road look unfamiliar. I was driving home from a late shift at a warehouse outside Columbus. My phone was at 8%, my gas tank was almost empty, and I had been awake for nearly 20 hours. Then I saw it, a red and white Wendy's sign glowing through the rain. Open 24 hours. I almost laughed from relief. I pulled into the parking lot. That was my first mistake. The parking lot was completely empty. Not one car, not even a delivery truck, but the restaurant lights were on. I parked near the entrance and looked through the glass. There was someone standing behind the counter. A woman. She appeared to be wearing an old Wendy's uniform. She didn't move. I pressed the automatic door button. Nothing happened. I tried again. The doors opened. A cold smell hit me. Not the smell of burgers or fries. It smelled like wet concrete and something else. Something metallic. I stepped inside. Hello? The woman behind the counter slowly raised her head. She was probably in her 50s with gray hair pulled tightly behind her head. She smiled. Late night? I nodded. Yeah, I just need some gas and food. She stared at me for several seconds. Then she said something that still makes my stomach turn whenever I remember it. You shouldn't have stopped here. I thought she was joking. I smiled nervously. Why? She looked toward the windows. Because this place closed 12 years ago. I laughed. Then I stopped. Because she wasn't laughing. Her name was Marilyn. At least that's what the little plastic name tag on her uniform said. She told me the Wendy's had once been busy. It sat beside an old county highway that used to carry thousands of cars every week. Families stopped there, truckers stopped there, teenagers came after football games, and Marilyn had worked the night shift every Friday for 11 years until the night her 16-year-old daughter, Emily, disappeared. Emily had been waiting for her mother after school. Marilyn told her to meet her at Wendy's, but Emily never came inside. At 11:43 p.m., Marilyn saw her daughter through the kitchen window. Emily was standing outside near the dumpster. Then the lights flickered. For only 3 seconds. When they came back on, Emily was gone. Police searched for weeks. They found nothing. No body, no clothing, no footprints. Nothing. Marilyn never believed Emily had simply run away. She was scared of the dark, Marilyn whispered. I didn't know what to say, so I asked the obvious question. What happened to the restaurant? Marilyn looked at me. It closed. When? 12 years ago. But you're still working here? She smiled. I never left. A strange silence filled the restaurant. Then I heard something. Knock. I looked toward the kitchen. Another knock. 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 Someone else here? I asked. Marilyn's face changed. No. The knocking stopped. I looked at the kitchen doors. There was a small window in one of them, and behind the glass, I saw a girl, maybe 16, wet hair, white hoodie, standing completely still. She was staring directly at me. I froze. Marilyn! Marilyn grabbed my wrist, hard. Don't look at her. I turned back. The girl was gone. Who was that? Marilyn whispered. Emily. I should have left. Every instinct in my body told me to walk out, but my car wouldn't start. I tried the ignition. Nothing. Again. Nothing. My phone had dropped to 3%. I ran back inside. Marilyn, my car won't start. She didn't answer. She was staring at the clock. 2:31 a.m. Then she whispered, She knows you're here. Who? Emily. I stepped backward. What does she want? Marilyn looked at me with tears in her eyes. She wants someone to take her home. I stared at her. Where is her home? Marilyn pointed toward the kitchen. Through there. I shook my head. No. You came in because you were lost. I wasn't lost. You were. She pointed toward the front windows. I looked outside. My car was gone. The parking lot was gone. The road was gone. Everything outside the windows had disappeared. There was only darkness. I grabbed the door handle. Locked. I pulled harder. Nothing. Then the restaurant lights flickered. Once, twice, 3 times, and every time they came back on, something had changed. The first time, the chairs were different. The second time, the menu boards had changed. The third time, Emily was sitting at a table, right beside me. I screamed. She didn't move. She was soaked from head to toe. Water dripped from her hair onto the floor. Emily? She slowly looked up. Her eyes were filled with tears. Then she said, Mom promised she'd take me home. Marilyn began crying. I tried. Emily looked at her. You never came. I couldn't find you. You didn't look in the freezer. Marilyn covered her mouth. I looked toward the kitchen. The freezer? Emily stood. She pointed toward a metal door. There. The kitchen was freezing. Not cold. Freezing. My breath appeared in front of my face. Marilyn followed behind me. Emily stayed outside. I opened the freezer door. Inside were empty shelves. Nothing else. Then I noticed scratches on the floor. Someone had dragged something heavy across the tiles. Marilyn dropped to her knees. No. She began pulling at the bottom shelf. Behind it was a small opening. Inside was an old plastic Wendy's employee bag. Marilyn reached inside. She pulled out a phone, an old flip phone, the kind people used 15 years ago. She stared at it. This was Emily's. The phone suddenly rang. Ring. Marilyn almost dropped it. Ring. I whispered, answer it. She didn't. Ring. Finally, she pressed the button. No one spoke. Then we heard a little girl's voice. Not Emily, a child's voice. Mommy? Marilyn started shaking. The voice continued. I'm cold. Then the call ended. I looked at Marilyn. What was that? She didn't answer. Instead, she pointed at the freezer wall. There was writing scratched into the metal. Hundreds of names. Some were old, some were recent. And at the bottom, I saw my own name. Michael Reed. I stopped breathing. I had never told Marilyn my name. I stepped backward. Why is my name there? Marilyn looked at me. Because you're not the first person who stopped here. What happened to the others? She looked toward the dining area. There were now dozens of people sitting at the tables. Men, women, teenagers, truck drivers, all staring at me. None of them moved. Marilyn whispered, they stopped here too. The front doors suddenly unlocked. I ran. I didn't care about my car. I didn't care about Marilyn. I just ran. I pushed through the doors and fell onto wet pavement. Rain hit my face. Cars were driving past. Real cars, headlights, road signs, a normal highway. I looked behind me. There was no Wendy's, just an abandoned patch of grass beside an old closed gas station. I ran to the road and flagged down a truck. The driver stopped. He looked at me strangely. Are you okay? I told him everything. He didn't laugh. He simply asked, what exit did you take? I told him. He became pale. That Wendy's hasn't existed since 2014. I didn't understand. He showed me the location on his phone. There was nothing there, but I knew what I had seen. 3 days later, I went back with the police. They found the abandoned property. Inside the old building, investigators discovered something disturbing. Beneath the concrete floor was an underground storage room. Inside were personal belongings, wallets, phones, shoes, driver's licenses, things belonging to people who had disappeared over the years. And on one wall, hundreds of names, including Emily's. But my name wasn't there, at least, not anymore. The police asked me why. I couldn't answer, because I knew. Marilyn had erased it. 6 months passed. I stopped talking about that night. I got a new job, moved to another apartment, tried to forget. Then one rainy night at exactly 2:17 a.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. There was silence. Then a woman's voice. Marilyn. Michael? My blood went cold. Marilyn? She whispered. Thank you for finding my daughter. I couldn't speak. Then she said, but she isn't the one who brought you there? A pause. Who did? I heard a little girl laughing in the background. Then Marilyn whispered, Emily. The call ended. I immediately checked the number. It didn't exist. I thought that was the end, until the next morning. There was a Wendy's receipt underneath my apartment door. I hadn't ordered anything. The receipt was dated that same morning. At the top it said, thank you for visiting. Below it was one item. 1. Baconator. Then underneath, customer, Michael Reed, and at the bottom printed in tiny letters, see you again soon. I burned the receipt, but the next morning, there was another one, and every receipt since then has had the same time printed on it, 2:17 a.m. I haven't eaten at Wendy's since. I don't even drive near one anymore, but sometimes when I'm driving late at night and the rain gets heavy, I see that red and white sign in the distance, and I know I'm getting closer. The last time I saw it, something was different. The sign didn't say, open 24 hours. It said, Michael, we're still waiting. And underneath the sign, Emily was standing in the rain, smiling, waiting for me to stop. Story 5. I used to think the worst thing that could happen during a night shift at Wendy's was getting robbed. I was wrong. The worst thing was realizing that someone had been ordering food from the drive-thru for years, even though the person placing those orders had been dead for 11 years. My name is Daniel Carter, and this happened in November 2024 in a small town outside Columbus, Ohio. I was 26 years old, recently divorced, and desperate for money. My daughter, Lily, was 5. After the divorce, I moved into a cheap apartment and took whatever work I could find. That was how I ended up working the overnight shift at a Wendy's located beside an old county highway. The restaurant was nothing special. Red sign, frosty machines, a narrow parking lot, one broken streetlight near the dumpster, and a drive-thru that stayed open 24 hours. My shift started at 10 p.m. and ended at 6 a.m. Usually there were only 2 people working overnight, me and an older employee named Marcus. Marcus had worked there for almost 17 years. He knew every machine, every regular customer, and apparently every strange thing that had ever happened inside that building. On my first night, while we were cleaning the kitchen around midnight, Marcus suddenly asked me something strange. Daniel, you got kids? I told him about Lily. He smiled. Keep her away from this place after midnight. I laughed. Why? He stopped wiping the counter. Then he looked toward the drive-thru window. Because some people never learn when they're supposed to leave. I thought he was joking. I wish he had been. 3 weeks into the job, I started noticing something. Every night at exactly 2:13 a.m., the drive-thru speaker made a noise. Not the normal notification sound. It sounded like someone pressing the button from the other side. Beep. Then silence. The first time it happened, I assumed it was a malfunction. The second time, Marcus told me not to answer. The third time, I asked him why. He simply said, because if they say your name, don't respond. That was when I realized he wasn't joking. One night around 2:10, Marcus went into the storage room. I was alone at the front counter. Then, beep, the drive-thru speaker activated. I stared at the screen. Nothing appeared. Then a voice came through. A woman's voice, soft, almost whispering. Can I get a number 7? I froze. The order screen remained completely blank. I pressed the communication button. "Sorry, ma'am, could you repeat that?" Static. Then the woman said, "Daniel?" My entire body went cold. I had never told her my name. I stepped away from the counter. "Who is this?" Silence. Then the voice whispered, "You're not supposed to be working tonight." The speaker clicked off. Marcus came running from the back. "What did she say?" I told him. He didn't look surprised. He looked scared. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he locked the front doors. "Daniel," he said quietly, "you need to listen to me." He pulled a chair from underneath the counter and sat down. "About 11 years ago, a girl named Emily worked here." I looked at him. She was 19, college student, worked nights to pay tuition. Marcus swallowed. "She was pregnant." I didn't know what to say. He continued. "Her boyfriend disappeared when he found out. Emily kept working. She planned to give the baby up for adoption." "What happened to her?" Marcus stared at the floor. "She disappeared during a night shift." I felt a chill move across my arms. "Disappeared?" "She clocked in at 9:47 p.m. Marcus looked toward the kitchen. "She never clocked out." Police searched the restaurant. Nothing. They searched the parking lot. Nothing. They checked cameras. And that's when things became strange. At 2:13 a.m., the security camera showed Emily walking toward the drive-thru window. Then the camera went black. For exactly 11 minutes. When it came back, Emily was gone. Her car was still parked outside. Her purse was still inside. Her phone was on the counter. But she was never found. The case eventually went cold. Marcus leaned closer. 3 months later, the night manager quit. Why? He said he kept hearing Emily ordering food through the speaker. I stared at him. "What did she order?" Marcus answered without hesitation. "A number 7. After that conversation, I wanted to quit. But I needed the money, so I stayed. For the next few nights, nothing happened. Then on a Thursday, I saw something on the security monitor. It was 2:13 a.m. The drive-thru lane was empty, but the camera showed a little girl standing beside the menu board. She looked about 5 years old. She was wearing a yellow coat. I grabbed the radio. "Marcus?" No answer. I ran outside. The parking lot was empty. I checked behind the menu. Nothing. Then I heard a child laughing from inside the restaurant. I ran back. The front doors were still locked. The kitchen was empty, but on the counter sat a small paper bag, a Wendy's kids meal. I hadn't made it. Nobody had. There was a name written on it. Lily. My daughter's name. I couldn't breathe. I called Marcus. He answered immediately. "Leave." "What?" "Leave the restaurant right now." I grabbed my jacket. Then the drive-thru speaker activated. Beep. The woman's voice returned. "Daniel." I stopped. "Where is my daughter?" The voice whispered. "She knows where the baby is." The speaker went dead. I ran. The next morning, I drove straight to the police station. I told an officer everything. He listened politely. Then he asked me one question. "Do you have a daughter named Lily?" "Yes." He stared at his computer. Then he looked at me strangely. "Daniel, Lily Carter died?" My heart stopped. "What?" He turned the screen toward me. There was an old missing person report. Lily Carter. Age 5, missing since 2019. I laughed because it made no sense. "My daughter's alive." The officer frowned. "Sir, the report says she was found deceased 6 years ago." I walked out of the station without saying another word. I drove home. My hands were shaking. When I opened my apartment door, Lily was sitting on the couch, watching television. "Daddy?" I couldn't move. She smiled. "You're home early." I rushed to her and hugged her. She felt warm, real, alive. But when I pulled away, I noticed something on her wrist, a small red bracelet. I had never seen it before. "Where did you get that?" She looked at it. "Emily gave it to me." My blood turned cold. "Who's Emily?" Lily pointed toward the window. "The lady from Wendy's." That night, I didn't sleep. At 1:30 a.m., I called Marcus. He didn't answer. At 1:50, I called again. Nothing. At 2, I drove back to Wendy's. I knew I shouldn't. But I needed answers. The restaurant was dark. Marcus's car wasn't there. I unlocked the door with my employee key. Inside, everything smelled like old fryer oil and disinfectant. I walked to the office. There was an old filing cabinet in the corner. I opened it. Inside were employee records going back decades. Then I found Emily's file. Her photograph was attached to the front. 19 years old. Brown hair, blue eyes, a nervous smile. I opened the folder. There was one handwritten note. She didn't disappear. Underneath it, check beneath the drive-thru. I grabbed a flashlight. Outside, I followed the drive-thru lane toward the window. Behind the restaurant was an old maintenance hatch. I had never noticed it. The lock was already broken. I opened it. A narrow staircase disappeared into darkness. I went down. The air smelled damp. There were old pipes everywhere. Then my flashlight landed on a wall. Someone had written names on it. Dozens of names. Employees, customers, people I didn't recognize. And at the very bottom was a fresh name. Daniel Carter. Below it was another. Lily Carter. I backed away. Then I heard footsteps behind me, slow, barefoot, step, step, step. I turned. Emily was standing at the bottom of the stairs. She looked exactly like the photograph, except her face was pale and her eyes were filled with tears. "Where's my baby?" she whispered. I couldn't speak. She stepped closer. "I waited 11 years. I finally managed to say, "I don't know." She shook her head. "You do." Then she pointed toward the wall. A section of bricks moved. Behind them was a tiny room. Inside was a wooden crib. And lying inside the crib was an old photograph. Emily holding a newborn baby. On the back was a date, November 14, 2013, and one sentence: "If they ever ask about the baby, tell them she was never born." I heard a door slam upstairs. Then Marcus screamed. I ran toward the stairs. "Marcus!" No answer. I climbed as fast as I could. When I reached the restaurant, every light was on. Marcus stood behind the counter. His back was facing me. "Marcus!" He slowly turned. His face was covered in blood. But it wasn't his. He pointed toward the drive-thru window. "She came back." The speaker activated. Beep. Emily's voice whispered, "Daniel." I looked at Marcus. "What does she want?" Marcus began crying. "She wants you to remember." "Remember what?" He looked at me. Then he said something I'll never forget. "Your daughter isn't your daughter." The restaurant lights suddenly went out. Complete darkness. Then I heard a little girl's voice behind me. "Daddy!" I turned. Lily was standing in the doorway, but her eyes weren't the eyes of a 5-year-old. She looked terrified. "Daddy," she whispered, "don't let her take me." Behind her stood Emily. Emily reached out, and Lily screamed. I grabbed my daughter and ran. We escaped through the back door. I never returned to that Wendy's. The next morning, I went to the police again. This time, they searched the building. They found the underground room. They found Emily's belongings. They found evidence that she had been living beneath the restaurant for weeks before she disappeared. But they never found Emily. And they never found Marcus. Both disappeared. The restaurant was closed 3 days later. The company demolished the building several months afterward. I moved to another state. I changed Lily's school. I changed my phone number. I never told anyone what happened until last week because something arrived at my apartment. A Wendy's paper bag, no address, no delivery information. Inside was a kid's meal and a red bracelet. There was also a note, 3 words. "She remembers now." I called Lily. She didn't answer. I checked her room. Empty. Her bedroom window was open, and on the floor was a small piece of paper, written in a child's handwriting. It said, "Daddy, Emily finally found me." That was the last time I saw my daughter. But every night at exactly 2:13 a.m., my phone receives the same notification. No number, no caller ID, just one message. "Can I get a number 7? And sometimes, if I don't turn off the lights, I can hear a little girl laughing outside my front door. I don't know where Lily is. I don't know who Emily really was. And I don't know why they chose me. But yesterday something happened that made me realize this story isn't over. I opened my refrigerator. Inside was a Wendy's Frosty. I hadn't bought it. Written on the cup was my daughter's handwriting. 4 words. Daddy, I'm still hungry.